those closest to you, sorry, no, not after those closest to you, people in your life. So you could think of closest to you as family. But you could also add to them neighbors, right? So closest as in relationship, and closest. So these are closest in meaning, and then the closest in terms of physical proximity, right? So let me just put this here as notes. So closest, family, family and neighbors. And we spoke, I think, before on the how the Prophet ﷺ stressed or emphasized the rights of neighbors before. Right. So it says people in your life, after these two categories, people in your life fall into three categories: friends, acquaintances, and strangers. Three distinct categories. Keep in mind that in today's world, some of these categories are becoming blurry, right? We no longer differentiate between a friend and an acquaintance. We no longer differentiate between an acquaintance and a stranger, right? Especially with social media. It's a question, and I think it's for us to explore together. How would Imam Ghazali, for example, categorize friends on social media? Right? And even when we say friends on social media, what does that mean? Like which platform, right? So friends on Facebook may be different than followers on Instagram, right? So how would you categorize these types of virtual relationships, right? At the beginning, and I remember, when social media was starting, people used to, there was a time period in which people still realized that the real relationships, they remain in sort of like real life, physical life, right? And social media is kind of, it's on the peripheral, right? But then gradually, people now think of the social media as if it's the followers or the friends on social media. Perhaps they give them more attention than real relationships, right? You might even know details about someone that you never met in your life, but you know a lot. But if you ask the same person something about their cousin, they don't know. Or something about their neighbor, they don't know. Or something about even their uncle or aunt or sometimes siblings, right? Because they're not posting. If you post, I would know. But you don't post, how would I know? Right? So people now, the notion of what constitutes a human relationship is something that is becoming ambiguous, something that is becoming vague, right? What is a friend? And it's almost like it's a new social construct that human beings did not experience before. What the very bond that keeps us together, that bond became diluted, altered by the social media, right? So Imam al-Ghazali had for his time, no social media, right? People would have to send letters that would take weeks and months to arrive. But he saw that people are either after the closest. And I believe this remark, when he says after those closest to you, is very, very important, because it also tells us that this category, friends, acquaintances, and strangers, does not apply to those closest, right? But even in today's world, some of the youth, they don't know their priorities in terms of family and friends, for example. So Imam al-Ghazali is like, there are those who are closest, family, and then there's everybody else, right? And then everybody else comes in the three categories that you see in front of you: the friends, the acquaintances, and the strangers. And then Imam al-Ghazali, for each one, he will provide guidance. So what is the required guidance or etiquette towards friends? What is the required guidance towards the acquaintances? And then also the strangers. So he starts with the strangers. Right? He says, if you are tried, he says, if you're tried meaning it comes from the word trial, meaning like tested. It's a burden, in a sense. It says, if you're tried with having to sit with anonymous public, meaning the common folk you do not know, then observe the following etiquettes in their company. Now, some of what he mentions here is pretty much applicable to social media, right? Because in social media, yes, it puts a tag, a name to the face, right? So we assume that it puts a name to the face that now I know that individual. Let me just elaborate a little bit on that. So for example, you go to a grocery store, right? You go to Kohl's, you go to Woolies, and you decide to go to the cashier, not do it on your own. And there's someone, a young man, a young woman, old man, old woman, standing at the cashier, checking out your groceries, right? Now, how would you feel towards that individual? Would you categorize them as friends? No. Would you even categorize them as acquaintances? Not either. So they're kind of like strangers, right? Even though there is a bit of an interaction, you still consider them as strangers, like it's as if they're someone just walking on the sidewalk that you don't know, right? Now, why I mentioned the example of someone at the grocery store, because most of the time they have a name tag, right? But the person walking on the sidewalk, they don't print their name on their shirt, right? So they have their name tag, right, on their apparel. The fact that they have their name tag on the apparel, does that make them fall into acquaintances? You now know their name, but does that make them an acquaintance? No, it does not, right? But see, on social media, someone you don't know sends you a friend request. For whatever reason you accept. Now you have a face and a name. And that kind of immediately puts that individual, by a click of a button, into acquaintance. Right? Immediately, they became acquaintance. They're not strangers anymore. Right? You haven't seen them physically. They might be living in a different country. Right? And in some cases, they might be of a different gender. And it's all a fake profile. But let's assume it's real. Right? Let's assume it's real. Right? But all of a sudden, you deal with them as an acquaintance. You haven't met them in your life whatsoever. Even though the person at the grocery store, you might bump into them, because if you're going to that same groceries that is around or the closest to your neighborhood, you might start seeing that person, a couple times a week, right? It's a familiar face. You might not read their name tag. You don't know their name, but I recognize you, the guy at Kohl's, you're the guy at Woolies, right? But still, you consider them strangers, right? Like, you would not come up and say, guess what I ate today? You would not tell them that. Guess where I went yesterday? You would not tell them that. But you have no problem to share that with a person that sent you a friend request online and you never met them in your life. See? Because now, he's on my friends list. But the guy or the man or the woman that you see week in, week out, once a week, maybe you just bump into them because of the shifts. So you see them, you recognize their face. You're a stranger, I don't know you. You're not on my friends list. But the moment they become on the friends list, now I can share with them my stories. So they know where I ate, where I went, where I traveled, what I did, right? So you could see how the transformation is happening. Imam Ghazali, he sees the more strangers you know, the more burden you carry. See? He says, if you're tried with having to sit with anonymous public, see? The common folk you don't know, then observe the following etiquettes in their company. So he sees it as a burden, right? And yet in our, current modern day with the social media, we're increasing of that common folk that we don't know, right? The unknown common folk, so to speak. We're inviting every day more and more by accepting the follow, by accepting the friend request and so on and so forth. Right? We're accepting more and more, even though Imam Ghazali sees it as, it's a test. طيب. Then he says, imagine, this is not Imam Ghazali, this is a contemporary scholar, and he's speaking about social media and, the kind of like the virtual relationships. So he says, number one, avoid indulging in their conversations. No, we're going to join the trends, right? We're going to join the trends. If there's a conversation that is going on X, we're going to tweet, we're going to react, we're going to reply, right? So we'll not just contribute, we will indulge, right? We will indulge. We'll, full on. طيب, this is number one. Two, lend little ear to their rumors and hearsay. Oh, this is going to be our source of news, right? Everything we're going to learn is going to be on social media, right? Even our religion, we're going to get the religion from videos on TikToks and Instagram. We're going to read posts. We're not going to read books. Right? See how crazy that is, right? So he says, lend little ear to their rumors and hearsay, right? Now, we're giving them full ears, full attention, to the point that if we miss any of that, I'm missing out. I'm missing out of the, the conversation, the rumor, the trend, this and that. Overlook their coarse language and offensive speech. Keyboard warriors. And again, he's speaking at a time. I just want you to imagine or reflect on how crazy it is. So Imam Ghazali is at a time where for these things to kind of move from one region, district, town to another, it takes days, weeks, and months. Imam Ghazali passed away 505 after Hijrah, was born 450. So he was born 1,000 years ago, right? And so imagine how many strangers would he bump into? What is the population anyways, right? So some of us, the friends that you have on social media, the 1,000, the 2,000, whatever, the few hundreds, is probably the entire city that he was living in, the entire population. Not like his neighborhood, the entire city. You have an equal number of those individuals just on your own profile. Right? So Imam Ghazali is saying, overlook their coarse language and offensive speech. How many statements or words or utterances would he be exposed to in the 24 hours? Put aside the sleep, family time, reading, classes. How much? 10 minutes? Half an hour? An hour? Right? People nowadays, they spend hours per day on social media, right? With the strangers, the uncommon folk. You need water? Yeah? Sure? 100%? Okay. Maybe bring water. So he says, overlook their coarse language and offensive speech. One of the problems now, one of the problems with social media and the notion of coarse language and offensive speech is that people assume that the halal and haram does not apply to it because it's virtual, right? It's virtual. So why would the rulings apply to it, right? So it's almost like the bad utterance, it only applies if I see you to your face and I slander you, or if you slander someone to their face, if the person utters the bad word to them. But if they go in the comment section and they write it, that doesn't apply. So someone meets someone face to face and go you're an idiot. That's an insult. right? We're not supposed, well, this is very rude. The same person who will deem this rude is the same person who will say, oh, this guy is such an idiot online, right? Or you are such an idiot to the person themselves in the comment section. It's online. It's as if that online, that malaika, they don't have accounts on social media, so it doesn't, they don't write. Malaika exist here with us, but they're not on the, in the virtual world. So whatever we say in the virtual world is not recorded. Right? And also the problem is the coarse and offensive language that Imam Ghazali sees it as a burden, because now you have to maintain patience. You're not supposed to respond with the Jazakallah khair, with the utterances the same, in the same way, and so on and so forth, right? So it's, when you're exposed to these strangers who are using the offensive language, you are then adding the kind of burden. Number one, you don't want to be acting like them, so you don't want to assimilate. So there's a problem of assimilation, because the more you're exposed to something, the more you would find it easier to do, because everybody's doing it, right? And this is what's happening with social media, right? Everybody's doing it. So this is number one. Number two, that if this offensive speech applies to you, meaning the people are actually attacking you, or someone is speaking to you in that way, and in this case, now you have to maintain the patience. You're not supposed to retaliate. And if you retaliate, you don't respond in a way that is higher or more severe than what you received, and so on and so forth. The third issue that Imam Ghazali did not speak about, because it was not applicable at his time, is that slander, unless it's deleted, but even if it's deleted, people take screenshots, that slander remains. But the verbal one, you cannot rewind it. How are you going to rewind it? Someone said to you a bad word, right? Or you, God forbid, said to someone a bad word, verbally. Where did it go? Yes, it's in the books of the malaika, right? But is there a way for any other person to retrieve it? It cannot be, right? But social media, hey, it's right there. You could see it once, twice, thrice, right? And people don't realize that every time the person reads this, that it's almost like the sin is being repeated again and again and again, right? Number four, I want to add something that some people might say, oh, look, Sheikh Ahmed, I disagree with you. No, when what we say online does count. طيب. But if the people are public figures, it doesn't. They're a public figure, they're a celebrity, they deserve it. They expect this. Or they like this. They like the attention, so we give it to them. But you're cursing them. Yeah, but they like it. They can always stop they can always prohibit or prevent people from commenting. They left the comments box open. They know what they're doing is controversial. They deserve it. Right? See how the shaitan rationalizes the haram. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made an excuse in the Quran for the individual who speaks in a coarse way if they are if they are oppressed, or they are enduring an injustice, and they are outspoken about what they are enduring, right? He didn't make an excuse, oh, you can curse out celebrities because they are celebrities. See? But people find it as if it's halal, because it's a celebrity, they do controversial issues, they know they're going to be slandered, they know they're going to be cursed, they like to be on the trend, let them be. Then this, we're not applying the deen of the Prophet ﷺ there. This is more of like, Western liberalism. Then he says, be cautious not to meet them frequently or depend on them unnecessarily. Now, the meeting frequently, again, happens virtually. Depend on them in unnecessarily, meaning because this will create a sense of you'll be owing them. Right? You'll be indebted to those who are helping you. And you don't know who they are. And if you're overly dependent on someone that you do not know, you can put yourself in a situation where you're indebted to someone, and then they start asking you, remember that day I helped you, now you got to help me. Right? So Imam Ghazali is saying, don't make yourself indebted to someone you don't know. Right? The last one, he says, gently correct the wrongs with subtle advice and soft admonition. So two things, subtle, so this is implied, it's not explicit, and soft. Not violent, not assertive, soft admonition, subtle advice. Now, you could see how people, when they like to give advice or complain about something on social media, how they speak. Right? All those idiots, those stupid people that keep doing so-and-so. And you tell them, brothers, come on, don't speak like this. I did not say anyone. I just said the stupid people. I just said the idiots. Why do they think that they are the ones? I just made it general. So Imam al-Ghazali says, when you're speaking to strangers, even if you're not addressing a specific person, make it subtle, make it soft. Subtle meaning implied, soft, not assertive. And then, after these two conditions, he added a caveat. He said, but only when there is hope that they will accept it. Meaning, if there's no hope, then you don't have to bother with the advice and the admonition. And this is something very, very important that we have to keep in mind when it comes to enjoining good and forbidding evil. Some brothers and sisters, they think that forbidding evil and enjoining good is something that is sought in and of itself. Meanwhile, al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy al-munkar, enjoining good and forbidding evil, it's a means to an end. So if I know that it won't work, then I'm not obliged to do it. Right? It's a means to an end. What is the end? That good would be established, that the evil would be abstained from. But if you know that that individual will not listen, then it will not get you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you go up to their face and tell them the advice. You know from the beginning that they won't listen. Right? So you just need to, if you really care for that individual for whatever reason, then what you need to do is to create a context in which they can listen. And then you gotta play the longer game. But if you know that the individual won't listen, then don't give that advice. Then Imam al-Ghazali comes to speak about, so he just got the talk regarding, or the discussion, or the guidance regarding the strangers out of the way. Then he moves to the conditions for companionship and friendships. He said here, as for brothers and friends, you have two duties towards them. So the first of the two, that before forming companionship or friendship, you must first seek out the proper conditions for both. He will mention two main duties. Number one is the one that you see here, seeking out the proper conditions. And then the second is maintaining the etiquettes of companionship. Right? So there is a step before the etiquettes of companionship, which is, how do I select my friend? Right? And therefore, you could see Imam al-Ghazali is telling you that a friendship should be, and it's not always like that, but it should be a voluntary act. What do I mean by that? You don't form friendships haphazardly, right? You may be, because of the context, work, school, university, right? You develop acquaintances because they're there. You see them every day. They're not friends, they're not neighbors, but they're people in school, people at work, fine. But then out of these acquaintances, which ones will be friends? Oh, that's your decision. You did not decide whom you shall meet, meaning who will come across your way in your life. This is not something that you necessarily decided, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made you born in a certain country, in a certain state, in a certain town. You go to a certain school, you go to a certain university. You find a job at a certain company while other companies did not offer you the job. These sort of provisions, these sort of facilitations, it was not something that you decided. You just knocked on the door and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made one of these doors to open, right? You don't decide where to live, right? At least as a child, right? Maybe when you grow up, then you start having options. But at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates. So to a great extent, the people that come across, that you come across in your life, for the most part, or to a great extent, you haven't decided on them. They just come across your way. طيب. But then which ones of these people that you meet that are acquaintances, which ones that will be your friends is a different notion. And I'm pretty sure the parents know this when they say this to their children, for example, when they go to school, right? Because, you know, they find their children, for example, at school becoming closer to some of their classmates more than others. And then you start speaking to your child about whom you should be friends with. See? So they did not choose their classroom. But the parent already factors this in their mind. Yes, they did not choose their classroom, meaning who will be in their classroom as their classmates, but they have the liberty of choosing who will be close to me and who will not. Right? So when Imam Ghazali says, seek out the proper conditions, what is implied here? The implied meaning is that while acquaintances may not be chosen, friends ought to be selected carefully. Right? It's not always like that. Sometimes we just form friendships haphazardly. We don't think of these conditions. But Imam Ghazali is saying, ideally, you ought to consider these conditions. It's kind of like marriage as well. Like, you know, there are certain traits that ought to be sought in a spouse. But there are people who would get married without thinking, for example, about the suitability. It happens that people do that. So same thing, it happens that people sometimes form friendships without thinking about whether that individual is a suitable friend or not a suitable friend. So he says, do not befriend anyone except one who is worthy of brotherhood and friendship. So there's this notion now that he's introducing, worthy of brotherhood and friendship. So in other words, not everyone is worthy of that. And when we say worthy, because now Imam al-Ghazali said, you have this circle of those who are closest, family with the priorities, and then neighbors, right? So when you say someone is a friend, you're gonna bring someone from outside of these circles, and you're gonna kind of insert them here, right? So you're giving them a privilege in a sense, right? They're also giving you a privilege. So to give someone a privilege, to allow someone to have this proximity to you, you gotta be worthy of that proximity, right? And see, this meaning that Imam al-Ghazali is saying here, you might not hear it from people nowadays who speak about, you know, freedoms, right? Or speaking about love yourself. Right? You hear these sort of cliches, you know. You got to love yourself. So Imam al-Ghazali is telling you that. Love yourself. Not everyone is worthy of your friendship. Not everyone is worthy of your friendship. Not everyone is worthy to be in that close circle of yours. Right? And this meaning, unfortunately, we as Muslims, we sometimes just take the opposite of whatever the liberal West is saying, right? So if the liberal West is saying, love yourself, oh, no. This is a foreign Western meaning. It's an Islamic meaning, but it's not identical to what they're promoting. Right? So it's not like they're saying love yourself and we're saying hate yourself. No, it's just that our concept of what is the love of oneself is different, right? But we're not saying ignore yourself or hate yourself or despise yourself or don't respect yourself, right? Imam Ghazali is saying here explicitly, don't befriend anyone except one who is worthy of brotherhood and friendship. Right? He says, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, a person is upon the religion of his close companion. So let each of you carefully consider whom he takes as a companion. Because in companionships, in friendships, people assimilate, right? You see it, for example, between, husbands and wives. If they come from different backgrounds or different traits and so on and so forth, after a while, they brush off on one another, right? It happens when people migrate, right? It happens. Some of the things they assimilate. Why? Because it happens every day. Yes, there are certain things where they choose not to assimilate in, right? But for the exception of these particular things that they were conscious, they were aware, I will not compromise, I will not assimilate in these spaces, in these areas in society. You would find that everything else they assimilate. They say, I come from a certain background, these sort of issues, these sort of practices, these sort of cultural practices does not suit me. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, these 7 issues I won't do. What happens for the rest? For the most part, there's a great bulk of that culture. They are acquiring different degrees, depending on their age, depending on when they migrated, and so on and so forth. You see, the first generation immigrants is not like the second generation, is not like the third generation, right? Someone who migrated at a young age is not like someone who migrated who was an adult. So what happens is that people, through repeated interactions, people assimilate, people kind of brush off on one another. They start speaking like one another. Right? They start, having the same kind of expression, or the same kind of gaze, or the same kind of look, or the same posture. Right? It happens also between children and parents. You find the child is doing the same posture as the father, right? I know, for example, my dad, when he used to, rahimahullah, when he used to work in front of the computer screen, he used to do it like this, right? So I find myself the other day, I was looking at something on the screen and I was doing like that, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh wait, I didn't. This is not something that I was used to do, right? So, and when I saw it, I just recognized that this is his posture, but I did not make a deliberate decision then, or when I'll be in his age, I'll do like him. I didn't choose to do that. You get my point? Like I didn't have like a decision. Inshallah, when I'm in my 40s, when I'm looking at the computer screen, I'll put my hand on my face like that. It just happens. The same mechanism happens with friends. Right? And you see this often where it becomes very apparent with the children, right? So you see, especially at the beginning of a school year, or when they're going to a new school, right? Like, for example, my wife and I would recognize, that a certain shift in a behavior in one of our children, where they start talking in a certain way, or nagging in a certain way, or this or that, and we start saying, oh, where did you get that from? And you could see that it's happening at the same time they're seeing other children that are new to them. They haven't seen them before. So friendships are like that. People brush on one another. and it seeps and penetrates inside the self without you notice. Right? So if you meet someone, for example, and you become friends with someone who casually, and they do it without any kind of as we say in Arabic, takalluf. It doesn't need an effort from them. It's natural. It's a disposition that they have where they show off, for example. Right? It's not like every time they show off, they intend to show off. It's just part of them. It's their disposition to show off. Right? So whoever becomes friends with them, if the person is not attentive to that trait, what happens? They begin doing the same thing. Showing off, speaking in a similar way. So they have this expression in Arabic, they say, الطباع سراقة. الطباع means traits, character attributes. سراقة meaning almost like you steal the trait from the person, right? Or that it is acquired in a very subtle way. Just like a thief would take out something without the person realizes. Right? So traits are like that. They penetrate, and you won't realize the transformation only after. You won't realize what's happening. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, a person is upon the religion of his close companion. Al-mar'u ala dini khalili. He didn't say which religion. And it's not like the Prophet ﷺ saying this is something only applies to Muslims or applies to Islam. He's just saying that people, when they have close companions, they round up having the same creed. And when I say the same creed, I'm not saying like Sunni Shi'i. I'm not saying Muslim Christian or Sunni Shi'i or, Barelvi Deobandi or Orthodox Sunni Salafi. That's not what I mean. Sometimes the same creed can be the same perspective in life, right? How you perceive life, how you perceive dreams, how you perceive aspirations, how you perceive difficulties, right? Some people, certain people you become friends with, and difficulties, when you're through a difficulty, because of their language, because of their like how they speak about a difficulty, how they see a difficulty, right? How they're patient, how they help others be patient. You feel that the burden is less. It's almost like they're carrying it, from your shoulder, just the way, only through the language, the words that they utter, right? Meanwhile, others, if you're facing a difficulty or this or that, after the conversing with them, you feel that the difficulty is increasing. It's not lessening. It's becoming worse, right? And I don't mean that the person who makes it feel little, that they're belittling it. It's just that they have a more enduring persona to difficulties. They start telling you, look, I've been in worse situations, this and that. I'm sure it will get through, whatever doesn't kill you, benefits you. These type of things. You find words of assistance. They find people who are, helping you endure something. Meanwhile, others, you may share with them something that is, it's not a catastrophe, something that is bothering you. No, you should not accept that. You should go and tell them this and do this and do that. And it's something that was small, but they made your patience about it zero. They're telling you you're not supposed to tolerate this, right? So someone who's tolerant will help you become tolerant. Someone who's not tolerant will not make you tolerant. Right? Sometimes it happens, with friends of spouses. A man, for example, if he complains to a friend about his wife, says, no, you should marry another woman. Right? How are you enduring this? Or the opposite way. Don't let him speak to you like that. Seek divorce. Like that. Immediately. So, friends do affect Right? They have such a, because again, they're close. And the way that traits are acquired, it happens in a very subtle way. So when he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, a person is upon the religion of his close companion, he don't restrict the word religion to theology, but put into it the worldview, perception about the world, perception about relationships, perception about wealth, perception about family. So he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, so let each of you carefully consider. فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِلُ. He said, فَلْيَنْظُرْ, like consider carefully, contemplate. Don't enter into friendships haphazardly. And you see, if this is the case with friendships, then by analogy, and this is not a class on marriage, but I see there's an important hint there. If the Prophet ﷺ is saying, Al-mar'u ala dini khalilihi, a person is upon the religion of his close companion. By analogy, same thing applies to spouses. It's even more, because you spend more time with a spouse than you spend with a friend or a companion. And then he said, فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِلْ, meaning carefully consider who you will take as a companion. By analogy, carefully consider who you will take as a spouse. If he's telling you, don't let anyone be your friend, like you have to think before you let anyone becoming a friend. By analogy, you have to think and reflect who you will take as a spouse. Then he said, Imam Ghazali, if you are seeking a companion to share in your pursuit of knowledge or to accompany you in matters of religion and worldly life, then observe 5 qualities in him. Imam al-Ghazali will list 5 key qualities. They constitute the threshold. If the person passes these 5 qualities, if they're present, then we can start talking. I mean, not literally start talking, but I mean, this person is eligible. By the way, after these 5 qualities, you don't have to, you're not obliged to take them as a friend, but it makes them eligible to be a friend, all right? Because maybe these 5 qualities are there, and then there are certain other things that would not make that friendship work. Okay, so what is the first thing? You would assume that the first thing he would mention, they have to be Muslim, Sunni, Ash'ari, same madhab. Oh, he doesn't put that. What does he put? They need to have aql. They need to be sensible, rational individuals. He says there is no benefit in befriending a fool. Such a relationship will only end in estrangement and severance. At best, he will try to benefit you, but unintentionally bring you harm. An intelligent enemy is better than a foolish friend. See, you would think that the first thing he would put here is righteousness. He doesn't put it as the first one. You would think that the first thing he would put here is sincerity. No, he doesn't put it as the first one. Right? He puts the first thing is that person, do they have a sense of rational judgment? Or are they impulsive, erroneous, heedless? They may be sincere, kind-hearted, truthful in what they say, but they don't have a rational judgment. They can be erratic, impulsive. They're kind. They would make great sacrifices for your sake. They're willing to take a bullet, as we would say, for your sake. But they don't have the intellect, the rationality in their decisions. Like they're not wise. So that individual, while you may feel eager to have them as a friend, this person is willing, sacrifice. They put me They consider me more important than themselves. They sacrifice for me. They're truthful. I know they're truthful, right? But they take decisions, whether related to you or in general, that are harmful. Yes, it's unintentional, but that are harmful. Like they don't think, right? And I see, you could see on social media these reels that the friend is and then they get these movie clips. I'm not sure if you saw any of that. Like they get these like movie clips where someone is showing up to a friend. He goes like, look, remember that day when you told me that when we go to fight with some people, this and that. Don't ask me why. Whatever happens. Tomorrow, the next day, don't ask me a question why we did that. Are you ready to come and fight? Right? There's some kind of scene by Ben Affleck. I still remember seeing something like that. He shows up to a friend and he goes like, you got to come with me. We're going to get into this fight with a bunch of folks. Right? There will be blood. And don't ask me why. Are you ready? Right? He's like, which car are we taking? Right? That friend replied like that. Which car are we taking? And then they put under the reel, this is the type of friend you need. Who says what? Which car are we taking? Like he doesn't think, right? He just allows you to act according to your temptations, allows you to act according to your triggers, right? And he's with you in that. And this type of personality is seen as the true friendship. He didn't question me why we're doing it. He allows me to do it, and he will join me in it without even asking for a justification. He will just do it, and that's it, because we're friends. See? So they take this example, and they make it revered, and appreciated, and glorified. Oh, this is the true friendship. Let's go fight, shed some blood. You don't know why, and you won't ask why. But we just stand up for each other, and that's it. Right? So, Imam al-Ghazali stresses on this notion, that the first thing is whether that individual has aql, has some wisdom. Now, note something. He said such a relationship will only end in estrangement and severance. Why did Imam al-Ghazali mention that? Because some friendships do come to an end. And if that friend is wise, then when that relationship is terminating, or it's terminating at that level, right, they still act wisely. Because look, when you're going to have a friend, it will happen that they will know some secrets about you. What if that friendship never continued? What if it ceases one day? Will that individual, act in a wise way, or will they act foolishly? So just to conclude, when Imam Ghazali said such a relationship will end in estrangement and severance, what this means that, well, there are friendships or relationships that can end, but it doesn't have to end in an estrangement or a severance. It's just like the notion of divorce, for example, right? Some people, when they divorce in a sensible, respectful way. And there might be other cases of divorce in which, they're pulling the hairs of one another, right? So it's the same thing. If I would summarize this point, it's almost like Imam al-Ghazali is telling you, when you choose a friend, choose someone that if you reach with them a point where you would no longer be friends with them, or they would no longer be friends with you, respect will still be maintained. And the way to guarantee this is not necessarily their righteousness on its own, but it's their wisdom. It's their wisdom. Because maybe the righteousness, the religious matter, changes. But if the person in their core, wise, they take rational judgments, they were raised properly, right? because you may have a friend who's not a Muslim. They were raised properly, right? Meaning they were raised like to keep a secret. To, if you disagree with someone and you're going to no longer be friends with them, don't stab them in their back, right? So he's almost saying, choose someone whom, even if you both reached a point of, look, I don't think it works. We're not going to remain close as we were. You're going to put them in acquaintances. Or if it's a marriage, I don't think it works. We would divorce. You would still find respect and some kind of a relationship maintained. And it happens where in some cases of divorce, where after the divorce, they still speak to one another, and if they have children and so on and so forth, respectfully and this and that. Meanwhile, other cases, right, still the battle continues for a few years, and then they start, drafting the children. On which team you're going to be on? You're going to be on your father's team or your mother's team, right? So their differences is dragging, and it's dragging into the lives of other people, in this case, their children. So bottom line, when you choose someone to enter this close circle, make sure that this individual, one of the key traits is that individual, if we ever reach a dead end for whatever reason, would that person act reasonably or not? If this is someone who's always impulsive, acting on triggers, then I cannot measure or have an expectation of their responses or reactions to what they don't like. طيب. Inshallah, we'll stop here بإذن and then we'll continue with the remaining of the conditions next class بإذن الله. جزاكم الله تعالى خير. بارك الله فيكم.